The RMS Titanic was a marvel of its time. It was a floating palace, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. People called it the unsinkable ship. Its decks were filled with laughter and excitement as it sailed from England, destined for a new world in America. Passengers walked along its grand staircase, dreaming of the futures that awaited them across the vast, calm ocean. The ship was a symbol of hope, a promise of a new beginning for so many souls who had boarded with hearts full of anticipation. It was more than steel and rivets. It was a vessel carrying the collective dreams of over 2,000 people. On board this magnificent ship was a man named John Harper. He was a Scottish preacher, a widower traveling with his precious 6-year-old daughter Nina and his niece. They were heading to Chicago, where he was invited to preach at the famous Moody Church. John was a man of simple yet profound faith. He saw God's hand in the gentle sway of the ship and the endless expanse of the sea. He was not a man of great wealth or status, but he possessed a richness of spirit that shone brightly. His journey was not just about crossing an ocean, it was about carrying a message of love and hope to a new land. The first few days of the voyage were peaceful. The sun shone brightly on the water and the nights were clear and filled with stars. On the evening of April 14, 1912, the air grew cold. The sea was as smooth as glass, reflecting the dark, star-studded sky. John Harper had spent the evening with his daughter, perhaps telling her stories and tucking her into bed. He looked out at the beautiful sunset with Nina and his niece, remarking on the beauty of the moment. He told them, with a peaceful heart, "It is going to be beautiful in the morning." He could not have known how prophetic those words would be. But then, disaster struck in the silent, freezing darkness. A great shudder ran through the massive ship. The unsinkable Titanic had hit an iceberg. Panic began to spread like a chilling fog through the corridors. The music stopped, replaced by shouts and the alarming sound of rushing water. The ship of dreams was quickly becoming a nightmare. The lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the faces of frightened passengers. In the midst of this chaos, as the great vessel began its slow, inevitable descent into the icy depths, John Harper's true character emerged, not in fear, but in unwavering faith. As the great ship tilted, and the reality of the situation became terrifyingly clear, John Harper's first thought was for his beloved daughter. He wrapped Nina in a warm blanket, held her close, and kissed her goodbye. He carefully handed her to a crewman, ensuring she was placed safely into one of the few available lifeboats. He could have tried to find a spot for himself. He could have clung to the hope of his own survival. But John Harper made a choice. He chose to stay behind on the sinking deck, watching the small boat carrying his daughter drift away into the immense darkness of the North Atlantic. His heart must have ached, yet his spirit was resolute. With his daughter safe, John turned his attention to the souls remaining on the ship. He did not run or hide. He did not despair. Instead, he began to walk among the terrified crowds, offering words of comfort and peace. His voice, usually reserved for the pulpit, became a beacon in the storm of fear. He spoke of God's love and the promise of salvation. He knelt with those who were weeping, praying with them and for them. He was no longer just a passenger, he was a shepherd, tending to a frightened flock in their darkest hour. He gave his own life jacket to another man, saying he had no need of it. His actions were a living sermon, more powerful than any he had ever delivered from behind a wooden lectern. He was showing everyone what it truly meant to have faith. It was not a faith for the sunny days and calm seas, but a faith for the moments when the ice tears a hole in the hull of your life. He urged people to turn to Christ, to find a hope that could not be sunk by any ocean, no matter how cold or deep. He moved with a purpose that defied the chaos swirling around him, a calm presence in the middle of an unfolding tragedy. Even as the ship groaned and its deck slanted steeply towards the water, John Harper continued his mission. He was not just trying to save lives from the freezing water, he was trying to save souls for eternity. He called out verses from the Bible, his voice rising above the sounds of the disaster. He wanted every person who could hear him to know that there was a source of strength beyond themselves, a hope that transcended their dire circumstances. He was a lighthouse of faith on a sinking ship, shining a light for others to follow until the very end. After the Titanic disappeared beneath the waves, the freezing water was filled with struggling survivors. John Harper was among them, clinging to a piece of wreckage in the icy blackness. Even then, in his final moments, his work was not finished. He floated near another man, a young Englishman who was clinging desperately to his own piece of floating debris. The young man was lost in despair, certain that this was the end. The cold was seeping into his bones, and all hope had faded from his heart. He was simply waiting for the inevitable. John Harper, his body failing but his spirit strong, called out to the young man across the dark water. "Are you saved?" he asked. The man, shocked by the question in such a moment, replied that he was not. John's voice came back, urgent but kind, carrying over the lapping waves. "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved," he pleaded. The currents of the ocean pulled them apart, separating them in the vast cold darkness. The young man was left alone with those powerful words echoing in his mind, a strange and unexpected offer of rescue. A short time later, the currents brought the two men close together once more. John Harper was weaker now, the relentless cold taking its toll. Yet, with what seemed to be his last breath, he called out to the young man again. He asked him the same question, his voice filled with a desperate compassion. "Are you saved now?" he asked. The young man, moved by this stranger's incredible persistence and faith, finally answered yes. He had accepted the hope that was being offered to him, a lifeboat for his soul in the middle of the ocean. Satisfied with the man's answer, John Harper's strength finally gave out. He let go of his piece of wreckage and slipped beneath the icy waves, his earthly mission complete. The young Englishman he had spoken to was one of only a handful of people pulled from the water that night who survived. Years later, at a testimony meeting, he shared his story. He spoke of the preacher in the water, the man who cared more for his eternal soul than for his own life. John Harper's final act was one of profound love, ensuring another man found faith before he himself went to his eternal home. When John Harper looked at the sunset with his little girl, he spoke of a beautiful morning to come. He could not have known that he would not see the sunrise on earth the next day. But for a person of faith, every ending is simply a new and more glorious beginning. The sun did set on his life in the cold Atlantic, but it rose for him in heaven. His words were a promise not just for a new day on a ship, but for an eternal day in a place where there is no more sorrow, no more fear, and no more icy waters. His was a sunrise in heaven. The story of John Harper is a powerful reminder that hope can be found in the most desperate of circumstances. In the midst of one of history's greatest maritime disasters, when everything was being lost, he was focused on what could be gained. He understood that the most important things in life are not material possessions or even our own survival, but the state of our soul and the love we show to others. His legacy is not one of tragedy but one of triumph, a triumph of faith over fear, and of love over death itself. His kindness to the young man in the water shows us the heart of his belief. He offered a spiritual lifeline, a hope that could anchor a soul even as the body was perishing. This is the core message of his faith, that even when the night is at its darkest, the dawn is coming. For those who believe, there is always a sunrise after the night, a promise of light and life that no darkness can extinguish. His final moments were not an end, but a transition into the beautiful morning he had spoken of just hours before. So, when we face our own trials, when our own ships seem to be sinking, we can remember John Harper. We can remember his courage, his compassion, and his unwavering trust in a promise that extends beyond this life. His story whispers to us across the years, a gentle encouragement to look for the light, even when we are surrounded by darkness. It teaches us that faith is not about avoiding the storms of life, but about having an anchor that holds firm through them, secure in the knowledge that a beautiful morning is always on its way.